The courtroom was electric, the kind of atmosphere where every cough, every shuffle of paper felt like thunder. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, their pens ready, their cameras flashing in bursts. Outside, the streets of Washington pulsed with anticipation as crowds gathered around giant screens, waiting for updates that could alter the nation's course. The headline had already shaken the country. Donald Trump's own lawyer was about to testify against him. Nobody could have scripted a more dramatic twist. The man sworn to protect Trump's secrets was now poised to reveal them. Donald Trump sat at the defendant's table, his jaw set, eyes darting between the judge and the counsel. He was used to controlling the stage, rallies, press conferences, boardrooms, but this was different. This stage was governed by law, not applause. And here, silence carried more power than a microphone ever could. The lawyer, once Trump's shield, now stood as his accuser. Calm, deliberate, almost eerily collected, he took the stand. He didn't posture, didn't perform. His voice was steady, each word carrying the weight of betrayal and truth. The first revelation was shocking, but not unexpected. The lengths Trump had allegedly gone to obscure financial dealings, the private conversations that painted a very different picture from the polished speeches. But then came the moment that made the courtroom collectively inhale and hold its breath. The lawyer described a private exchange late at night, when Trump had dismissed warnings, laughed off risks, and said words that now echoed like a confession. "They'll believe anything if I say it enough times." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The jury stiffened. Even the judge leaned back slightly, her expression carefully neutral, but eyes sharpened with focus. The weight of that line wasn't just legal, it was moral, cultural, historical. It summed up the very accusations that had dogged Trump's career. Manipulation, control of narrative, bending reality to his will. And now those words were coming not from an opponent, not from a journalist, but from the lips of his own lawyer. Trump's team erupted in objections, their voices rising, desperate to frame the statement as taken out of context. They argued it was strategy talk, not confession. But the damage was already done. The words had left the lawyer's mouth, and no objection could erase them from the jury's minds. Outside, within minutes, the quote lit up social media feeds like wildfire. Hashtag surged. Hashtag they'll believe anything trended instantly, transforming into memes, videos, and furious commentary. Late-night hosts prepared monologues before the day had even ended. And then, almost like a twist in a screenplay, Barack Obama weighed in. It wasn't in the courtroom, of course. But cameras cut live to a university forum where Obama was speaking, and mid-lecture, a moderator whispered something in his ear. Obama paused, smiled faintly, and addressed the audience. "You know," he began, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp, "we just heard a quote that says, 'They'll believe anything if I say it enough times.' That's not leadership. That's not strength. That's not truth. That's manipulation. And America deserves better than manipulation." The crowd erupted in applause, the timing uncanny, as if destiny had handed Obama the perfect stage at the perfect moment. Cable networks split their screens. On the left, the courtroom drama. On the right, Obama's live reaction. The contrast was cinematic, Trump's lawyer exposing him, while Obama delivered a moral rebuke in real time. The narrative had shifted from a legal battle to a symbolic clash between two presidencies, two visions of leadership. One built on repetition, spin, and spectacle. The other built on calm rebuke, dignity, and truth. Trump clenched his jaw tighter. His lawyers shuffled papers furiously, whispering strategies. But none of it could drown out the sound of history being written. The lawyer wasn't done. He continued, revealing documents, emails, and personal notes that backed his testimony. He spoke of nights when he urged caution, only to be brushed aside with bravado. He painted a portrait of a man unwilling to be guided by law, only by power. Every revelation deepened the wound. Every word cut into the myth of invincibility Trump had cultivated for years. By the end of the day, when the judge finally adjourned, the courtroom wasn't just a chamber of justice anymore. It was a stage where a legacy had begun to unravel. And as Trump stood to leave, flashes blinding him, chants from outside grew louder. Truth, truth, truth. The sound chased him down the corridors, echoing through marble walls, into the cameras, and across the nation. This wasn't just another trial. This was the day Donald Trump's lawyer turned into his greatest liability. And Obama, with just a few words, had turned that liability into a moral collapse. The second day of testimony began with an eerie quiet. The world had already absorbed the shock of Donald Trump's lawyer turning against him, but anticipation lingered like static in the air. What else could possibly be revealed? Trump entered the courtroom slower this time, his usual bravado muted. His team tried to project confidence, but even their hurried whispers betrayed nerves. Reporters noted the contrast. A man once the loudest voice in the room now walked under the shadow of his own words. The lawyer resumed the stand. If the first day had been about shocking quotes, the second was about evidence. Hard, undeniable, inescapable evidence. Emails displayed on screens, handwritten notes authenticated by experts, records cross-checked against phone logs. Each document told a story, each one aligning with the lawyer's calm testimony. One email stood out above all. It wasn't lengthy, but it was devastating in its clarity. Trump had written, "It's not about the facts, it's about the show. If the show is good, the facts don't matter." The courtroom seemed to freeze. The jury's pens stopped moving. Members of the press exchanged wide-eyed glances. This wasn't spin. This wasn't strategy. This was a blueprint of deception, authored by the man himself. Objections thundered from Trump's legal team. They argued about chain of custody, about authenticity, about context. But the judge, after a tense pause, allowed it in. The jury could see it. The world could see it. Social media erupted again. Screens filled with the damning phrase, "The facts don't matter." Commentators didn't need to stretch for analysis. The words spoke for themselves. And again, fate delivered perfect timing. Barack Obama, now fully aware of his role as a counter-voice in this unfolding drama, addressed the quote at another public event. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. His tone was steady, his delivery deliberate. When a leader says, "The facts don't matter," what they're really saying is, "You don't matter." Because facts are not just numbers or words. They are the truth that protects citizens. Without truth, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no democracy. The audience stood, applauding thunderously. The networks once again cut between courtroom and Obama. The visual split almost poetic. Trump's lawyer exposing deception on one side, Obama reasserting the value of truth on the other. Inside the courtroom, Trump's frustration boiled over. He leaned toward his lawyers, gesturing sharply, his lips pressed into a thin line. His image, once crafted as unflappable, unshakable, now cracked under the pressure. Cameras captured it, and within hours, the freeze frames became headlines. The lawyer, however, remained steady. His demeanor carried the weight of someone who had once believed in loyalty, but had chosen integrity over silence. He spoke not with vengeance, but with a burden lifted. And that tone, quiet, steady, human, only made his testimony more powerful. By mid-afternoon, the defense had constructed a timeline so tight, so interconnected, that it was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Each piece of evidence dovetailed with another, painting a picture too complete to ignore. For the jury, it wasn't just about legality anymore. It was about credibility. Could they believe a man who admitted in writing that facts were irrelevant? Could they trust someone who saw truth as expendable? The answer was already echoing in the room. The judge called a short recess, and outside, the press swarmed legal analysts for commentary. Some said the case had already been decided in the court of public opinion. Others speculated on whether Trump's team would attempt a settlement, anything to stem the bleeding. But the narrative was beyond their control now. Every headline, every clip, every trending hashtag drove the story deeper into the national consciousness. That night, pundits debated the historical weight of the moment. They compared it to Nixon's tapes, Clinton's testimony, Watergate, and beyond. But one analyst put it most simply, this isn't just evidence against a man. This is evidence against a myth, the myth of invincibility. Meanwhile, Obama's words continued to circulate. replayed endlessly alongside the damning quotes from Trump's own lawyer. The contrast sharpened with every repetition. Manipulation versus truth, arrogance versus dignity. The following morning, newspapers across the country carried headlines that felt less like news and more like epitaphs. Trump's words become his undoing. Lawyer exposes the showman. Obama defines the moment. For Donald Trump, the courtroom had become a stage he could not control. For his lawyer, it was a place of reckoning. For Barack Obama, it was an opportunity to remind Americans of something deeper than politics, the power of truth itself. And for the nation, it was a moment of clarity. The kind that doesn't just fill headlines for a week, but etches itself into the history books. Trump had built a legacy on repetition, on the belief that if you say something loudly enough, long enough, people will accept it. But in this courtroom, against the testimony of his own lawyer, against the calm rebuke of a former president, repetition failed. The truth had caught up. And when it didn't just challenge his case. It unraveled his legacy. As the gavel struck to close the session, one thing was certain. This was no longer a trial of law alone. It was a trial of character, of trust, of the very idea of leadership. And in that trial, the verdict was already echoing far beyond the walls of the courtroom.